Hey guys, Barry McGoody here for another episode of the Comeback Game podcast, Inspired Unstoppable. Today I've got good friend Paul Dunn. Paul, mate, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, thank you. It's great to see you. Let's see, it was about 4 weeks ago that we met
Yeah,
in Los Angeles for the first time. I mean, we've known of each other for quite a while, but first time we met, and it was
yeah,
great to see you on stage too, by the way.
yeah, mate, it was absolutely excellent. So, Paul, you're a 4 times TEDx speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, and master presenter, and I can definitely attest to that. Your presentation was phenomenal. You've received numerous honors for your work. You're a senior fellow in one of the world's leading think tanks and consult to some mentors of leading-edge businesses around the world. Mate, I've got a long list of accolades here from you in your history as a business owner entrepreneur. So I'm pretty pumped to kind of dive down a bit deeper to understand like what's not here. But before we do, for all the viewers out there watching this today or listening to this in their car, wherever they are, let's share a little bit about who you are in terms of what you've actually done. And then we'll get to what you're currently doing right now, which I think is just an absolute game changer.
Well, thank you. And Barry, I have to say, when I listened to you in LA, it was this beautiful sort of hero's journey thing. We went through all of, all of those things that entrepreneurs go through. And so when I compare mine to yours, I think, that's pretty interesting, because I look at mine. No, I do. I look at mine in kind of a different way. I look at mine as one of just total luck. I mean, yes, I grew up in a little tiny poor place, and my dad was a miner and all that sort of stuff. And then I got headhunted. I mean, how lucky is this? I got headhunted by Hewlett Packard in Australia. And so I was one of the first 10 in HP. And so consider that, if you will, I mean, this was before most of our listeners here were born, but, consider you're hanging out with icons, like Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, started my first company as a result of that, which is one of Australia's first computer companies. That was interesting. Grew that to, 23 million or so by 1981. And the thing that I think is important in relation to game changers is to realize that all of life, where we are now, you and I, or where everybody is now, is a result of critical moments, actually, critical moments that go back in the timeline. And 6th of December, 1980, again, that's before most of us were born, probably, most listeners were born, I had one of those game changer moments. And what happened was someone dragged me to a seminar, literally dragged me. I'm not kidding you. I mean, why did I want to go? I had 150 people reporting to me. Why the hell did I want to go to a seminar? What's a seminar? Right? And it was Jim Rohn, the late James Rohn. And
Wow.
and I sat, and as you know, if you've listened to Rohn doesn't kind of move around stages like you and I do. Rohn stands stock still, and he's kind of got this little thing, and he opens it up and he reads, about Mr. Schoaf and all that kind of stuff. And so I wasn't impressed with the movement, but I was impressed by the words.
Yeah.
And, one of the great things I think that all of us need to learn is to, when we hear something, take action on it. Just take action. And so I did. And that night I called up my colleagues in the computer company. I said, I'm not here. And I said, you might want to wait around for a bit, And so I said, okay. So on the 1st of April, actually, in 1981, I started this thing called Results Corporation. And, that gave us this opportunity to talk with 23,000 small to medium scale businesses in Australia and right around the world. And then I flipped that in 1992 into the accounting profession, simply because I realized that all accountants at that point, it's changed a bit, but at that point, if you said to an accountant, what do you do? If they were being really honest, they would say, well, we report on history. And I said to them, well, wouldn't it be great if instead of saying that, you were able to say, we help our selected clients create history. And so that was the start of a process called the Accountants Boot Camp and so on and so forth. And then, just to bring it really quickly up to it again, these critical moments, and this was, sort of a comeback thing for so many people. For me, it happened in 2006. So I'd already in 2000 sold everything, decided that I would retire. You know me, I could not do that, right? So here I am in 2006, and I'm at a program, at a seminar as an attendee. And, you know, I've got some status, if you like, at this point. And one of the guys is in Bangalore. And one of the guys there who I knew said, "Hey, Paul, can I take you to dinner tonight?" I said, "Sure." And this was in 2006. And he said, "I want you to meet a friend of mine." So I meet this guy whose name is, I'm introduced him as Pastor Selva. And I go, "Oh, it's interesting." And so I say, "Tell me your story." And he says, "Well, 4 years ago, I got to I was asked to create a little community and a church in this island off India." And he said, life all changed. And he said, I said, "Oh, really? What happened?" He said, "Well, about 18 months ago," now, Barry, I should have recognized what he was talking about. He said, "About 18 months ago," and he said, "just after Christmas Day." So that should have locked me onto it. He said, "Life changed." And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, we were in Sunday school. We had 12 kids, or I had 12 kids either side of me. And right in the middle of what we were talking about, he said, I heard a noise unlike any other noise I'd ever heard." And he said, "I rushed outside and I saw this great wall of water that was going to engulf us." And of course, what I realized at that point he was talking about was the 2004 tsunami. And oh my God, you know, what happened then? And he said, "Well, I went inside and I told the children to hold hands and we would walk to the high ground or run to the high ground." And he said, "We stood there and 6 kids either side. And and we looked as the church was crumbled and washed away. And then we stood there as their parents were washed away as well." And I mean, honestly, Barry, I can't remember what I said. I just can't remember what I said. But at some point you get to, okay, so what happened then? And he said, "Well, last 18 months, we've been traveling around India, and finally we had someone give us a place where we could stay. But now it's pretty desperate. You know, the kids need food, the kids need to go to school." And I did what anyone else would say if they were on that conversation. And I said, "So, okay, so have you figured out how much it costs?" And they said, or he said, "Yeah." He said, "It's, in fact, my friend, has helped me do that." And he said, "It's $3,500 US." And I said, "Oh, that's per child, right?" And he said, No. So that's for all 12. And again, had you been there or anybody listening to us, you would have said what I said, which is, "Oh, well, that's fixed. We'll fix that. You don't know how, but you just know you're going to do it." And so I did that. And then the tail end of that story is that some 5 weeks later, I get an email from him. He's gone down to a cafe, internet cafe, and he's sent me this email, which is a beautiful email. And he's borrowed a camera. And so he sent 4 JPEGs. Right? First JPEG is a sort of long shot of this tiny little house. Second JPEG is inside the house. There's only one room. And here are all the kids in a circle. And he said, "See, they've got food." Next shot, same kids, slightly rearranged. He said, "See, they're doing their schoolwork." Right? And then the next shot is the close-up of this place. And right across the top of it, they've written in great big letters, "Paul Dunn Home." You know, you go, oh my God. That was one of those moments when you realize, first of all, it's not all about you. Second of all, the gift in that moment was the understanding of why we do what we do. So, and as for example, I mean, I didn't understand all of that at that time, but I just got something. And here's what I got. If we were doing this interview before that time, I would have said, and you said, "Well, what's, doing business all about?" I would have said, it's all about adding enormous value to the people that you're privileged to serve. That's the first thing. Second thing, it's about having fun doing that, right? And that's it. That's it, full stop. But once I had that experience, I realized, oh, there's something else here. There's an obligation that we have as business owners to do much more. And Barry, you would know, because you talk about this, reticular activation system and stuff. And you know that, for example, as do the people listening to us, that if you go and pick up a new car and you're driving that car home tonight, that every third car is the same car that you just picked up, right? It's just that they were there, but you didn't notice it. And so when you have those experiences, such as that one that I had, all of that stuff was already there. You know, there was stuff happening around me, but I didn't notice it. And one of the things happening around me was I met Masami Sato. I was mentoring her, and she, in that mentoring session, had this idea of, wouldn't it be great? And it was like a random idea. Wouldn't it be great if every time people did business in our world, something great happened? And she called it at that point. I said, "Right, yeah, that would be great." And she had this idea. It was called at that point, "Buy one, give one." And I really didn't understand it at first. And I said, "Well, how's that work?" And she said, "Well, you imagine you go down to the word she actually used was Harvey Norman, you know, the electrical store, and you buy a TV." And I said, "Whoa, stop, Masami. If I go and buy the TV, then I'm not going to, they're not going to give me another one, as in buy one, give one." And she said, "You don't understand." I said, "What is it I don't understand?" She said, "Well, you go and buy the TV because you want better vision. So how would it be," she said, "if when you bought the TV, somebody who could not see got the gift of sight?" And I went, "Oh, wow." And then, you know, she's on a roll. And so she says, you know, or imagine you having a cup of coffee and the kid gets access to water, or imagine, you know, someone buys your book and a tree gets planted. I went, "Whoa, that's amazing." And this was in 2007. And I said, "Can I be your mentor for the rest of your life?" And there she is, right there. Equally importantly is that's what happens. You know, that's what happened as a result. Those 160 million giving impacts around the world. But again, I look back on that, and yes, you know, there's critical moments there. But I always think that those critical moments are guiding moments, which kind of gets you to a place. And interesting enough, they never stop, right? I mean, the reason you and I met in Los Angeles, and the reason we stayed in the room when everyone else is speaking, is because fundamentally we're curious. We know it never stops, right? And there's always stuff we can learn. So I feel very privileged to be on this journey, and very privileged to connect with people like you as well.
Yeah, as do I. Do you think that throughout your journey in business, like contribution was always a strong value that you had, or was it something that came around later? Because it's something that I'm very curious about. It's like, you know, I often say to people that when you're broke, it's very hard to make money, right? Yet when you've got money, it's very easy to make money. And it's not because money makes money, but it's the mindset and it's the psychology behind that, is that when we're energetically showing up from a place of scarcity, the world shows up from a place of scarcity, and we attract scarce experience, as opposed to when we're showing up abundantly. A lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, but you know, I'm struggling to put food on the table. You know, I need to contribute to me first." And it's sort of something that comes through from innate history, I suppose, is that we have that creature neurology, that need to survive. And so what I'm curious about is did you always have that value of contribution, or was it something that was kind of developed, shown to you, grown, defining moment that kind of popped up along the way?
I think it's a great question. And I think inside all of us as human beings, it's kind of part of our DNA, you know, that we know there's something, right? But I think many of us go through this, well, someday I'll, right? And it's like, well, someday when I'm successful, you know, I'll do this. And it's like, well, what is it you don't understand? You understand this is a journey, and you've got to kind of act like that there. So as you just so beautifully said, so it shows up for you. All the while you're coming from that different place. It's never going to be there. And I just got fortunate, I guess, that I actually say now, you know, that was 12 years ago. And I say, you know, I seriously doubt, this is perhaps an overstatement, but I seriously doubt whether I would be here now had I not found that, and then found, you know, this hopefully, you know, passion and curiosity, which continues to drive me and give me life whilst we're in the process, of course, of making life possible for so many others as well. So
that's a question I've got is like, what impact, like if you were to look at timeline of your life from now back, 20, 30 years ago, like what impact did that defining moment have, or has it had in terms of like financial for you personally, in terms of like growth, emotionally, energetically, spiritually, in terms of like fulfillment? Like what impact has that had from that moment of realizing that we're here to play a bigger role than just, go to work, buy the house with a white picket fence, find someone nice, settle down, get married, have kids, and put food on the table? Like, what impact has that actually had through realizing this greater sense of contribution and your responsibility that you have, or we have, as business owners and entrepreneurs, to help other people out there that are not in the same position as us?
Yeah. Well, on all of those metrics that you mentioned, that it's just been amazing, and I think the probably the biggest thing is the people that I now get to contribute with, if that makes sense. There's much more showing up, and I could drop names. I don't do that, but there's much more showing up, and the joy comes from not necessarily something coming to you per se, and you would experience this every day through what you do, but great stuff happening when, let's just think for a moment of speaking. What greater privilege could there be than standing on a stage, or indeed doing podcasts where you're in front of an audience and you're able to lift their understanding to new ways, so that as a result they go on and do new things that they never thought were possible, and at the same time then inspire others. That's what all of that has opened up for me, plus much more. But that's the thing. I think it's a great question, by the way, Barry. Yeah, great question.
So what I'd be curious, like I could imagine some of the viewers and listeners out there that might be challenged or struggling right now. It's like, it's that old saying that we can't see the forest from the trees, right? And you talk about the rec and things like that, and the reticular activating system. And it's like, if someone is going through challenges right now, maybe they're struggling to pay their staff wages, maybe they're, struggling to put food on the table, maybe they're in early stage of business, or they've been in business for a while and made some mistakes and are challenged, they're filtering in this conversation very differently than the people out there listening right now that are kind of at a level where their business is maybe making a bunch of profit. They're not working too many hours. And like, I feel a bit empty and hollow inside. And how do I feel fulfillment? How do I feel loved? Right. So there's multiple conversations that people are hearing right now based on what they're filtering in. And so what I'd love to kind of do to bring everyone into this conversation is look at like, what have been some of the biggest, like you talk about being lucky, right? And I don't know if you believe in luck any more than I do. Luck is like preparation meets opportunity, right? But what have been some of the challenges or the adversities that you've been confronted with? Because I don't know a single person that is in business, all right, successful or not, that hasn't faced significant challenges, because that's part of the journey. And as a business owner, entrepreneur, we don't kind of sign up to business thinking it's going to be easy. And if we do, we learn very quickly that's not the case. So what have been some of the biggest challenges or the adversities that have been presented in your journey to get to where you are today?
They happen every day. But if you wanted, what are the big ones? One particularly big one was when we were, I was mentioning when we were running results accounting systems, and I was focused, or results corporation as it was then called. And I was so focused on, doing great things and adding value and everything else. And I had someone else looking after where the money was. It's never been a big thing for me, And then all of a sudden, I remember this month, September, October, they came and said, "Oh my God, there's none, or there's going to be none. We've got a 2 months, a 2 month window. And if we keep going like this, all of that work we've done," and there were 23,000 people, out there we were working with, all of that work we've done is just gone down the drain. What are you going to do? That does focus the mind, I have to say. But that's the beautiful thing. It focuses the mind, as in, okay, so how do I change that? And I think there's two things I want to say about that. Let me say the first one. The first one is this: bearing in mind this whole curiosity thing. I remember when that was happening, right? I was reading a book, and it's a book that you would know and many of our listeners would know. And it was this guy. It was the first book he'd written, actually. Well, the second, but most people think it's the first one. And it was called The E-Myth. Remember that? By Michael Gerber. Yeah. And I'm reading this book, right, 1990, and I get to page 30, and I go, oh my God, he's writing this for me. And I go to the back of the book, right, because I want to get him. I want to go, whoa, people in Australia want to hear this. So I go to the back. There was a fax number. That's how long ago that was. So I fax him, and I say, Michael, this is just an astonishing work, and I would love you to come to Australia and talk with our members. And first thing he said was, I don't have a passport. I said, well, let's not worry about that. Let's find a way of getting you one.
Yeah.
And he turns up. He just turned up in February. We had, let's see, 4 cities we did, and we averaged 350 people or business owners at each one of those. And you multiply that up, and it becomes like, whoa, how interesting is that? And at the same time, being able, by the way, to contribute to Michael, and I don't mean financially. I remember we were having this meeting in Adelaide, and he says, this sounds like a really fascinating thing that you've got going here, And I said, sure it is. And he said, can we get a serviette? And he said, map it out for me. What's this look like? And so I map it out, and we get in the elevator, I remember, and he says, I'm going to call it the E-Myth Academy. That was how the E-Myth Academy was formed. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think that's really, really important about that is this whole thing that is challenging. And you did it beautifully by articulating, how you bring people into this conversation, because there are people who are thinking in this conversation, oh yeah, well, that's okay for you because, blah, 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 blah. And I think that's the issue. One of the things that people tell us about being a part of B1G1, because, there's some great things, you can give from 1 cent, so there's no excuse. 100% goes, all of that's right. You can do all of that. But what they say is that it's not about that. Listen to this. It's not about that. What they say is it's about shifting the spirit. And it's about transforming. And that's the reality. When you shift the spirit, when you get it off you, as tough as that is to figure out, when you get it off you, and you're asking different questions, and you're asking questions like, how can I contribute? What, then you're going to find great answers. And those moments are going to be these defining moments that we talk about. But yeah, that question you asked before is such a crucial question.
And so how have you found those challenges have helped you to grow into who you are today? Like how have you taken those challenges, those adversities, those things that have happened, and transformed them into lessons, into learnings, into energy, into spirit, as you say, to create what you guys have created at the moment, which in B1G1, which is just absolutely extraordinary.
Well, I was at a program once, and a guy asked me, I was in the room supporting him as a speaker, if you like, and he was, I was there kind of mentoring him, if you like. And he got to this point where he's going to talk about failure. He has this big, FEAR, false expectations appearing, the standard thing that people do. And I'm in the room, and I've said to him, I'm not going to speak, right? I'm just here to mentor you. And he can't resist it. And he says, oh, failure. I said, oh, Paul's probably had some failures. Let's get Paul out the front, talk about failures. And I won't go through the whole thing, but I so resisted it, and he's saying things like, oh, he's only playing hard to get, give him a big round of, and I just resisted and resisted and resisted. But finally, I have to get out the front, right? And what I realized was, as he's telling me, he says, okay, Paul, give me your experience. I'm actually walking backwards away from him until I'm pinned against the wall. And I didn't realize it, but, afterwards people said, wow, that was interesting. And what I realized was that that word, failure, just was not a word that, and this is not some clever thing, right? I mean, it's actually how I felt. That word just didn't compute. I didn't know how to handle the word. I really didn't. And I think that's just been something that's, stood with me in as much as, what a great opportunity it was to learn that whatever that was is not the way to do it. There's another way. I mean, we hear, just a couple of weeks ago on a massive issue. I mean, massive issue in terms of, software performance and all of that kind of stuff. And the whole attitude around here is, and it could sink people really, but the whole attitude around here is, okay, so what can we learn from that? And then how do we correct it? And how do we make sure that just doesn't happen anymore? But of course it is going to happen some more, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's like, and sorry,
I was just going to say, I think that certainly from what I see is people spend way too much time on the problem and not enough time on the solution. They spend 95% of their time analyzing the problem and 5% on creating a solution when the problem exists. Like I see it flipped on the head, like 5% of evaluating the problem and 95% of your energy and focus on the solution, because I honestly believe that we live in a world where the solution exists before the problem even occurs.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it
does. I think that people feel that they need to go and seek that outside of self. They need to go and find it, or they need to go through enough pain to justify the answer appearing without realizing the answer's already there. They just haven't found it yet, or they haven't seen it or discovered it yet.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, I forget who it was who said this. It could have been Jim Rohn, but he said, the answer's always there, and whether or not you find it depends upon the questions you ask. Yeah. Right. And so once we start learning that, and it's always there, and I love that focus you said, focus 95% on the solutions. That's awesome. And I mean, if you just think about that word of advice, right? What has that just done? That word of advice for people listening to us now. The moment they get that and act on that, then what's actually happened is it shifted the spirit. It's shifted the spirit, because all of a sudden now we're talking about possibilities, right? Yeah. Rather than, oh God, and the whole sort of victim thing that goes on. Yeah.
The top 5% are not necessarily any more well-equipped than the bottom 95%. I see the difference is yes, there's a knowledge aspect, but the knowledge is gained through experience. And it's like that whole saying, if you want to succeed twice as quick, fail twice as fast. And the only way you're able to do that is by taking twice as much action. Like be willing to be okay to know that as a business owner, as a husband, as a wife, as a brother, as a sister, as a son, as a daughter, there's going to be times that you make mistakes, or there's going to be times that shit happens, or, the choice that you choose doesn't result in the outcome you want to have. Yet, we've got the ability to choose again. We've got the ability to make another decision.
That's right. In fact, I was reading a book called Sapiens, which is, how man got to be man. Isn't it a great book?
Great book, yeah.
And here in B1G1 every morning, we have this little get together, and, one of us talks about our values and stuff like that. And just for, a couple of minutes and things. And a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about that. And I said, one of the things that I took from, how come we're here right now is that you've got to learn to trust your gut. Your gut knows, because the reality is it's got us here right now. Yeah. Now, the point to realize in this is it's not analysis that got us here, right? It's like, oh, okay, bang, and then boom, you go do it. Does that make sense? And so,
if we're constantly making decisions based on analysis, often we're making those based on past experiences, which past experiences have got you to here, but they're not going to get you to there. Otherwise, you'd already be there. So this is where, you talk gut, I talk heart, like trusting our heart and that innate knowing that we have. It's no different than going to the gym and working out. The more that we start to trust our intuition and our knowing, the more that we're going to realize it's guiding us in the right direction through life. And we can analyze that information, and we can use the brain to articulate that. But ultimately, I believe that we should be living a heart-centered, authentic life from here. and backing it up from here. And even if you look at the way that we're created, like in our mother's womb, the heart is formed, created before the brain and the mind. You know, nature always gives us the clues in which things evolve. And I honestly believe that something's happened in our upbringing where, you know, we've been miseducated to believe that things should be done logically. You know, it plays its part, but it's one of many pieces.
Yeah, beautifully put. Absolutely beautifully put. And it's so right. By the way, when I say I love your little flip on that, because I think it's the same thing. You know, trust your gut is what we used to say, but we now know that it's the same as, you know, trust your heart. And again, as you're listening to this, you know, listen to that. You know, it's your innate knowing. There is this innateness about it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be where we are. So, yeah. Love it.
Mate, two things I'd like to know before we wrap the show up, or three things actually, but two things. First of all, like, how do you set yourself up for your day? Like how do you set yourself up to have a good day? Is there a ritual that you go through? Is there any sort of a process that you have?
Yeah, and it actually happens to me at least twice a day. Usually when I go to bed, always, and then when I get up. And I have a journal, which I'm sure you do. I have one that's called a gratitude journal, and so you just go through that and you think about, you know, what are the things that you are grateful for throughout the day, and then what are the things that you are doing today which lead you into that particular space as well. It just gets you focused. As you know, it's like going to the gym, as you said a minute ago. Sometimes you go, oh gosh, that's the last thing I want to do. But there's something about it that when you do it, it just sets you up perfectly.
Yeah, I find it conditions your mind. Like, you know, we can look at life however we choose. Like, you know, we never see life as life is. We see it as we are, and the filters.
Absolutely do.
You know, something that I have on my mirror in the bathroom is change expectations for appreciations. Is that we can go through life expecting things of others, or we can go through life appreciating things of others. And, you know, what you sow, you know, what you sow, you reap. You reap what you sow. And if we're sowing thoughts of gratitude or things that we're appreciative about, we're going to have more to be grateful for. So I think that that's really awesome. I suppose the second thing is, like, anyone out there listening right now, like, what key piece of advice would you give them? Like, you know, they're out there, they're wanting to experience more in life. They may be going through some challenges right now. Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? What's the key bit of advice that you give people out there listening?
That's always a tough question. And because it presumes that, you know, I'm able to do that. Right. But so all I can do is say what works for me, really.
Yeah.
And what works for me, and I mentioned this to you in Los Angeles, is this whole thing that, you know, like when you're going on stage, right? And I really get that it's for us, like before we did this thing, I went through for us. And to understand that, and to understand that it's not just about you. It's about how you can make more contribution. It's about how you can give more of yourself to others, to recognize that that's how we move forward as individuals, and of course as communities and as our world.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. And finally, you know, for the viewers and listeners out there, can you just share a little bit about what you guys are up to with B1G1, and if they feel drawn to kind of check it out, where they can find you guys as well? Just because I think that I remember I sat there and I watched you present, and first and foremost, I was just blown away. You know, like when you see a presenter that's mastered their craft, it's like, you know, when you're in this space, and I was just blown away at your ability to move the audience and move the energy in the room. But, you know, when you shared what you guys were up to, I was like, holy shit, like this is what I've been looking for the last 6 months. You know, in our company, it's like looking for somewhere where we can contribute and make a difference far greater than what we are just with our clients, which already is huge. But how can we also not just make an impact in our clients and their businesses, but how can we make an impact to other people that can't directly work with us? And when you shared what you guys are doing, I was blown away. So tell us a bit about what B1G1 is, and then where they can find you.
Yeah, and by the way, just as a prelude to that story, I was talking to someone yesterday who's in real estate and doing very, very well, by the way. And her first name is Georgia. And she was looking in at B1G1, and I said, "So why are you looking at it?" She said, "You know what, Paul? It's because I kind of love what I do, but I get home at the end of the day and I say, is that all there is?"
Yeah.
And you know, I think there's so many people doing that, and it's recognizing that there is this piece inside us that innately knows, you know, that that's what we want to do. So what B1G1 does is make that really easy to do, because what you can do is link things in your business and in your life that means that every time you do this, for example, I have a little thing in my B1G1 thing that says every time I go for a run, a kid gets access to a playground somewhere. I have another one that says every time I eat breakfast, kids get grain seeds someplace else. In business, you know, I talked about every time we create, or it could be accountants, for example, have this thing with goats. I don't know why they do, but every time we create a new client, you know, somebody gets a goat to create a sustainable income for themselves. And, you know, there's what, 657 or so enormously impactful projects around the world that you can kind of link into, and it's none of this stuff that we previously had, you know, which is XYZ company proudly supports something over there that we think is no longer valid. And so it's this ability to just change and chop and change and do something that might in fact be inspiring to your client rather than just inspiring to you. So what B1G1 does is make that happen. So it makes all of the processes in your business or indeed in your life, you're in control of it, total control, and you set them up so that when this happens, that happens. And that could be one of those things that, because, you know, we look up here and we see the 160 million impact, but internally in B1G1, we think of that as 160 million smiles. Just imagine that, because, you know, people, and by the way, most of those projects, this is very important as well, most of those projects are not about handouts, because that's not a good way to go. It creates dependency. They're all about hand up. How can we, you know, provide things that do great things in our world as well? So, and b1g1.com is where you go. Just very, very simple, and you'll see it all there, and you'll see all of the great people who are involved, and why it really does make sense, and why it transforms and shifts the spirit. Yes, there's all of these great things going on, but the reality is that the outcome is that it shifts the spirit in this beautiful, beautiful way.
Yeah, yeah. Paul, mate, I really appreciate your time, your wisdom, your knowledge, your friendship. For those of you guys out there watching and listening, please comment, like, share with people that you think need to hear this. And by all means, too, if you feel drawn, check out b1g1.com and see what these guys are up to. It's absolutely game-changing. Thanks so much for your time, Paul.
Hey, Barry, thank you for yours. Great. And thank you for your insights as well. Awesome stuff.